Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Mike Thompson, and this was my 4th hour searching for Brandon Mitchell in the dense pine forests of Olympic National Park. My radio crackled with static as I keyed the mic with trembling fingers that refused to stay steady. Unit 47 to base, still no sign of the missing hiker. Grid section Charlie 7 complete, moving to Delta 7. My voice came out more hoarse than I intended, betraying the exhaustion already creeping into my 26-year-old body. Copy that, Thompson. Any tracks or disturbance? Ranger Supervisor Patricia Hayes' voice carried that edge of concern that made my stomach clench with inadequacy. I paused, studying the forest floor through my issued Garmin GPS unit. The coordinates read 47.8021 degrau N, 123.60444 deg W, deeper into the old growth section than most day hikers ventured. Brandon's family had been calling the station every 30 minutes since reporting him missing at dawn. His mother's voice still echoed in my head. Please, he's only 19. He has his whole life ahead of him. He's all we have. Negative on tracks, but I hesitated, then forced myself to continue. The wildlife's acting strange. Haven't heard a single bird call in over an hour, and I found deer tracks heading away from this area in what looks like panic formation. Static filled the silence before Hayes responded. Keep moving, Thompson. Weather Service is calling for heavy rainfall by 1800 hours. We need to find him before visibility drops to 0. The pressure squeezed my lungs like invisible hands. 3 months into this job, and I was handling my first real missing person case solo. Every other rookie would have been paired with a veteran, but budget cuts meant I was learning search and rescue protocols while someone's son was potentially dying in the wilderness. My breathing became shallow and rapid as I shouldered my 40-pound pack and continued along the unmarked trail. The October air should have been crisp and refreshing, but something felt fundamentally wrong about the atmosphere. The temperature seemed to fluctuate randomly, cold patches that raised goosebumps along my arms, followed by pockets of stifling warmth that made sweat pool beneath my Kevlar vest. I'd memorized Brandon Mitchell's file that morning. 19 years old, University of Washington sophomore studying environmental science, experienced hiker, according to his roommate. Last seen on the Hurricane Ridge Trail at approximately 600 hours, wearing a red North Face jacket, blue jeans, and carrying a black REI day pack with water and energy bars for what should have been a simple 4-hour loop hike. 6 hours later, he'd vanished. My handheld radio sputtered with interference as I tried to raise base again. Unit 47 to base, radio check. Nothing but static answered. I stopped walking, suddenly aware that my footsteps were the only sound penetrating the unnatural forest silence. My shoulders climbed toward my ears as an involuntary defensive posture took hold. Every few steps, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, responding to a persistent sensation of being observed by unseen eyes. The GPS coordinates kept leading me deeper into a section of the park I'd only studied on topographical maps during training. Dense stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock created a canopy so thick that the forest floor remained perpetually dim, even at midday. My issued flashlight felt inadequate against the creeping shadows that seemed to shift independently of the filtered sunlight. I knelt beside a fallen log to examine what looked like a partial footprint in the damp earth. The tread pattern matched Brandon's hiking boots according to the description his roommate had provided. Relief flooded through me until I realized the print was facing directly away from the main trail, toward a section of forest that my training maps had marked as Restricted Access Historical Preservation Zone. My hands shook as I photographed the print with my department-issued digital camera, then uploaded the coordinates to the GPS tracking system. Protocol demanded I radio the discovery to base, but my radio continued producing nothing but static and electronic interference. The isolation pressed against my chest like a physical weight. During training, Supervisor Hayes had emphasized that Rangers never ever continued searches alone without radio contact. But Brandon Mitchell's mother's desperate voice played on repeat in my memory. and turning back felt like abandoning the first real test of my capabilities. I followed the footprint trail toward the restricted zone, marking my path with reflective tape every 50 yards. The forest grew progressively darker and more oppressive with each step. My breathing came in quick, shallow bursts, as if the atmosphere itself had become thinner and harder to process. 20 minutes deeper into the restricted area, I discovered something that made my blood feel like it had turned to ice water in my veins. A second set of footprints appeared alongside Brandon's, larger, wearing what appeared to be military-style combat boots. The stride pattern suggested someone much taller and heavier than the missing college student. More disturbing, the boot prints showed no signs of following Brandon's path. Instead, they ran parallel, as if someone had been shadowing the young hiker's movement through the forest. I photographed the evidence with hands that refused to remain steady, then continued following both sets of tracks. My jaw muscles locked so tightly that I could hear my teeth grinding together. The logical part of my brain insisted there had to be a reasonable explanation, maybe another search and rescue volunteer, maybe a park maintenance worker. But something primitive in my nervous system was screaming warnings that I couldn't rationally justify. The dual-track trail led to a clearing I'd never seen on any park service map. In the center stood the ruins of what appeared to be an old logging camp structure, weathered concrete foundations overgrown with moss and ferns. But as I approached for a closer examination, details emerged that didn't match any historical logging operation. Heavy-gauge steel grating covered what looked like an entrance descending into the ground. Fresh tool marks scarred the metal, and a new padlock secured the grate with modern high-security hardware that seemed completely out of place in the abandoned wilderness. My vision narrowed to tunnel-like focus as adrenaline flooded my system. Every instinct developed through 3 months of ranger training told me to immediately retreat and call for backup. But my radio remained dead, and Brandon Mitchell was somewhere in this forest, possibly injured, possibly worse. I circled the mysterious entrance, documenting everything with my camera. Fresh tire tracks led from the structure toward what appeared to be an old service road, now barely visible beneath years of overgrowth. Someone had been using this location recently, and frequently. The boot prints I'd been following ended at the steel grating. Brandon's footprint stopped there too. I tried my radio again, adjusting the frequency and checking the battery level. Full power, correct channel, but nothing except electronic static that seemed almost deliberately jamming my transmissions. My mouth became dry as sawdust as the implications settled into my consciousness. Someone didn't want me communicating with the outside world. I pulled out my personal cell phone, hoping for even a single bar of signal. The screen showed no service in every direction I pointed the antenna. That was impossible. I'd had 3 bars of coverage when I'd started the search that morning, and I was only 6 miles from the park headquarters. My neck muscles hardened like steel cables as paranoia began infiltrating my thoughts. Every shadow in the forest periphery seemed to contain potential movement. Every small sound of settling branches or rustling leaves triggered hyper-vigilant reflexes that made me spin toward perceived threats. I needed to get back to base and report the discovery, but something kept me frozen beside that steel grating. Brandon Mitchell's mother trusted me to find her son. His family was counting on me, and I was 3 months into a career I'd dreamed about since childhood. Walking away felt like professional suicide and personal cowardice, but staying felt like something far worse. I compromised by searching the immediate area for any additional clues about Brandon's fate. The concrete foundations revealed recent disturbance in the surrounding soil, fresh excavation that hadn't been there long enough for vegetation to reestablish. Someone had been digging in multiple locations around the structure. That's when I found the piece of red fabric caught on a thorny bush 15 feet from the entrance, north face red. The exact shade described in Brandon Mitchell's missing person report. My hands trembled as I photographed the evidence and carefully bagged it in an evidence collection envelope from my pack. The fabric showed signs of forcible tearing, and dark stains that could have been blood or dirt or something worse covered one edge. I had to get into that underground structure. Every protocol I'd learned screamed against proceeding without backup, but this was potentially the only lead that could save Brandon's life. If he was being held somewhere below ground, every minute of delay reduced his chances of survival. I examined the padlock more closely, hoping to find some weakness or alternative entry point. The steel grating was embedded in concrete and appeared designed to prevent exactly what I was attempting. But as I worked my way around the perimeter, I discovered that recent excavation had partially undermined one corner section. With 15 minutes of careful digging using a folding shovel from my pack, I managed to create a gap barely wide enough for my body to squeeze through. The darkness below was absolute. I activated my high-intensity LED flashlight and peered into what appeared to be a hand-excavated tunnel, descending at a steep angle into the earth. The walls showed tool marks from professional excavation equipment, and wooden support beams suggested this was a permanent installation rather than a temporary hiding place. Someone had spent considerable time and resources creating this underground facility. The temperature inside felt noticeably warmer than the surface air, and a strange odor drifted up from the depths, a mixture of damp earth, industrial chemicals, and something organic that I couldn't identify, but that made my stomach contract with nausea. I squeezed through the gap and began descending the tunnel, my flashlight beam revealing a carefully constructed underground corridor that extended far beyond the range of my light. Every few steps I stopped to listen for any sounds that might indicate Brandon's presence or potential threats. The silence was complete, and somehow more oppressive than the forest above. 20 feet down the tunnel, I discovered the first chamber. My flashlight illuminated a rectangular room carved from the earth and reinforced with concrete walls. Industrial shelving lined the space, holding supplies that made my blood freeze in my veins. Rope, duct tape, industrial zip ties, medical instruments that gleamed with recent cleaning, and dozens of glass containers filled with chemical solutions I couldn't identify. This wasn't a survival shelter or research facility. This was a prison designed for holding human beings. My breathing became so rapid and shallow that spots appeared at the edges of my vision. The rational part of my mind insisted I needed to retreat immediately and bring proper law enforcement backup. But deeper in the tunnel system, I could hear something that made retreat impossible. Someone was crying. Weak, exhausted sobbing echoed from somewhere ahead in the darkness. "Brandon?" I called out, my voice cracking with tension. "Brandon Mitchell?" The crying stopped immediately, replaced by desperate, muffled sounds that could have been someone trying to speak through a gag. I moved deeper into the tunnel system, following the sounds and discovering additional chambers carved into the earth. Each room contained evidence of long-term human habitation, sleeping areas, basic sanitation facilities, and industrial shackles mounted to concrete walls. This was an operational kidnapping facility, and Brandon Mitchell was somewhere inside. I found him in the fourth chamber, 30 feet underground. The 19-year-old college student was alive, but secured to the wall with heavy chains around his ankles. Duct tape covered his mouth, and his red North Face jacket was torn and stained with blood and dirt. His eyes went wide with relief and desperation when my flashlight beam illuminated his face. "I'm Ranger Thompson," I whispered, moving quickly to begin removing his restraints. "I'm going to get you out of here." But as I worked on the lock securing his chains, Brandon's eyes suddenly filled with terror, and he began making frantic sounds through his gag. Not relief, but warning. I turned just as something heavy struck the back of my skull. The world exploded into stars and darkness, and I collapsed onto the concrete floor as my flashlight rolled away, its beam revealing heavy work boots approaching through the tunnel entrance. Well, a gravelly voice echoed through the chamber. "Looks like we caught ourselves a forest ranger." My vision swam as I tried to focus on the figure standing over me. The man was large, probably 6'4" and heavily muscled, wearing military surplus clothing and carrying a high-powered tactical flashlight. His face was weathered and scarred, with eyes that held no trace of human empathy. "Name's Carl Hendricks," he said, kneeling beside my prone form. "And you just wandered into my private collection area." He secured my hands behind my back with industrial zip ties that cut into my wrists, then dragged me to a sitting position against the concrete wall. Brandon watched with terrified eyes as our captor examined my ranger identification and equipment. 3 months on the job, Hendricks read from my ID card. Practically still a trainee. They're sending babies to do men's work these days. My head throbbed with each heartbeat, but I forced myself to speak. "People know where I am. They'll send search teams when I don't report in. Hendricks laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. Boy, I've been operating in these woods for 8 years without anyone getting close. Your radio's been jammed since you entered my territory, your cell phone won't work, and your GPS tracking beacon. He held up a small electronic device. Stopped transmitting when I activated my signal blocker. The psychological impact hit me harder than the physical blow to my head. No one knew where I was. No one was coming to help. Brandon and I were completely at the mercy of a predator who had turned the forest into his personal hunting ground. See, I've got a very specific hobby, Hendricks continued, settling onto a folding chair that suggested he spent considerable time in these underground chambers. I collect people, hikers, campers, the occasional park ranger who gets too curious about things that don't concern them. He gestured toward Brandon. Young Mr. Mitchell here was supposed to be a routine addition to my collection. College boy out for a nature walk. Family won't start seriously looking for a few days. Plenty of time to integrate him into my facility. But then you had to go and complicate things. My mind raced through possible escape scenarios, but the reality was overwhelming. Hendricks clearly had years of experience operating this kidnapping operation. The underground facility was professionally constructed and strategically located in a restricted area where official searches would be limited. Even if I could somehow overpower him, finding our way out of the tunnel system without light would be nearly impossible. But Brandon Mitchell's mother was counting on me to bring her son home. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my throat. "Want?" Hendricks seemed genuinely amused by the question. "Boy, I've got everything I want right here. A private facility where I can pursue my interests without interference, a steady supply of visitors who wander into my territory, and now a forest ranger who can provide some interesting variety to my collection." He stood and walked to a metal cabinet, retrieving several items that made my stomach lurch with nausea. Medical instruments, restraint devices, and chemical containers that suggested prolonged captivity rather than quick elimination. You see, most people assume predators like me are interested in quick violence. Get in, get out, dump the body somewhere remote. But I'm what you might call a connoisseur. I prefer to study my subjects over extended periods, understand what makes them tick, how long they can maintain hope before breaking completely. Brandon made desperate sounds through his gag, tears streaming down his face. Mr. Mitchell here has been quite fascinating. 19 years old, studying environmental science, wanted to save the forests. The irony is delicious, don't you think? Saved by the very wilderness he loved. Hendricks began preparing restraints clearly intended for long-term use. But you, Ranger Thompson, represent something special. Law enforcement training, physical conditioning, psychological resilience. It could take months to properly break down your defenses. The implications of his words triggered a complete fight-or-flight response that overwhelmed my rational thinking. My breathing became so rapid and shallow that hyperventilation threatened to make me pass out. Sweat poured down my back despite the cool underground temperature, and my muscles alternated between rigid tension and uncontrollable trembling. But somewhere in the psychological chaos, I remembered my training. 3 months of Ranger Academy had included wilderness survival scenarios, basic law enforcement procedures, and emergency response protocols. More importantly, I remembered something Supervisor Hayes had emphasized during our last training session. Panic kills more people in emergency situations than actual danger. Your brain is your most important survival tool. I forced myself to slow my breathing and assess the situation strategically. Hendricks was large and physically powerful, but he was also overconfident. 8 years of successful operation had made him careless about security procedures. He'd restrained my hands but not my feet, and he'd left my utility belt with basic ranger equipment within potential reach. The tunnel system was complex, but I'd memorized the route from the entrance to this chamber. If I could create enough confusion to disorient him temporarily, Brandon and I might have a chance to reach the surface before he could pursue. But I needed a distraction significant enough to even the odds. I noticed that Hendricks had positioned his tactical flashlight on the metal cabinet, pointing toward the ceiling to provide general illumination for the chamber. The heavy LED unit was our only light source in the underground facility. If I could somehow extinguish it, the absolute darkness would neutralize his physical advantages and give us mobility options. "You're making a mistake," I said, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "Missing rangers trigger massive search operations. They'll bring in FBI, state police, specialized rescue teams. Your operation won't survive that kind of attention." Hendricks paused in his preparation. "Maybe, but by the time they organize a proper search, you'll be integrated into my collection permanently. And I've got contingency plans for relocating if necessary." He moved closer, kneeling to examine the restraints intended for my ankles. As he bent forward, his body blocked the direct light from the tactical flashlight, casting the chamber into partial shadow. This was my only opportunity. I lunged forward, using my shoulder to strike Hendricks in the chest while simultaneously kicking toward the metal cabinet supporting the flashlight. My aim was imperfect, but I managed to knock the light off its perch, sending it crashing to the concrete floor. The chamber plunged into absolute darkness. Hendricks roared with rage and pain, but I was already rolling toward where I'd seen Brandon restrained against the wall. My hands were still zip-tied behind my back, but my fingers could reach the folding knife attached to my utility belt. "Brandon, I'm going to cut your restraints," I whispered. "When I do, follow me toward the tunnel entrance. Stay close and move fast." I managed to retrieve the knife and begin sawing through the chains securing Brandon's ankles. The metal was thick and the angle awkward, but adrenaline gave me strength and focus I hadn't known I possessed. Hendricks was thrashing around the chamber, cursing and trying to locate his backup lighting. The concrete walls amplified every sound, creating acoustic confusion that worked in our favor. "Got it," I whispered as Brandon's restraints finally parted. "Move toward the tunnel, follow the wall, go now." We stumbled through the darkness toward the chamber entrance, navigating by touch and memory. Behind us, Hendricks had apparently found another light source, because an angry red glow began illuminating the chamber walls. "You're dead," he screamed. "Both of you are dead. There's nowhere to run in these tunnels." But we were already moving through the underground corridor, Brandon pulling the duct tape from his mouth as we rushed toward the surface entrance. My intimate knowledge of the route we descended gave us a crucial advantage. I could navigate the tunnel system even in limited visibility. "The entrance is 30 feet ahead," I told Brandon as we reached the ascending section. "There's a gap in the steel grating on the left side. Squeeze through and run toward the main trail." Daylight appeared ahead as we approached the surface opening. Behind us, Hendricks' pursuit was gaining ground, his angry shouts echoing through the tunnel system. Brandon squeezed through the gap first, then helped pull me to the surface. My hands were still restrained behind my back, but we were alive and free of the underground prison. "Run toward the main trail," I told him. "Head for the park headquarters. Tell them about the underground facility and that I'm pursuing the suspect." "What about you?" Brandon asked, his voice shaking with exhaustion and trauma. I looked back toward the tunnel entrance. Hendricks would emerge in moments, and he knew these woods better than anyone. If we ran together, he'd likely recapture us both before we could reach help. But if I could delay him long enough for Brandon to escape— "Go," I said. "That's an order." Brandon hesitated for a moment, then ran toward the trail system leading back to park headquarters. I positioned myself beside the tunnel entrance, waiting for Hendricks to emerge. My ranger training had included basic tactical procedures, but I was injured, restrained, and facing an opponent with years of experience hunting human beings in wilderness environments. The odds were not in my favor. Hendricks appeared at the tunnel entrance just as I heard Brandon's footsteps disappearing into the forest. The kidnapper's face was twisted with rage, and he carried what appeared to be a hunting knife that gleamed with deadly purpose. "You just made the biggest mistake of your very short life, boy," he snarled, advancing toward me with predatory confidence. I backed toward the tree line, trying to maintain distance while looking for any tactical advantage. My hands were still zip-tied, but my legs were free, and the dense forest offered potential concealment options. "Brandon's already reaching the main trail," I said, hoping to convince him that pursuit was futile. "Search teams will be here within the hour." "Maybe," Hendricks replied, "but you won't be alive to see them." He lunged forward with the knife, and I threw myself sideways, using the momentum to roll behind a large Douglas fir. The thick trunk provided temporary protection, but I knew I couldn't evade him indefinitely in my restrained condition. Then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world: helicopter rotors approaching from the east. Search and rescue operations had apparently begun despite my radio silence. The thunderous noise of the aircraft seemed to disorient Hendricks, who spun toward the sound with obvious concern. I used his distraction to put more distance between us, moving deeper into the forest toward what I hoped was the approaching rescue team. Unit 47, this is Air Rescue 1, do you copy? The radio call echoed through the forest from speakers mounted on the helicopter. I tried to shout a response, but my voice was hoarse and likely inaudible over the aircraft noise. Instead, I focused on reaching a clearing where the helicopter crew might spot me from above. Hendricks was pursuing, but the aerial search had clearly disrupted his confidence. 8 years of successful operation had depended on isolation and secrecy. A full-scale search and rescue deployment represented exactly the kind of official attention that could destroy his entire operation. I broke through the tree line into a small meadow just as the search helicopter appeared overhead. The pilot immediately spotted me and began circling for a landing approach. Behind me, Carl Hendricks had vanished back into the forest. The rescue was swift and professional. Within minutes, I was aboard the helicopter with my restraints removed and medical attention for my head injury. Brandon Mitchell was already safe at park headquarters, having reached the main trail and flagged down a search team. But as we lifted off for the flight back to civilization, I looked down at the forest where Hendricks had disappeared. 8 years of operation meant extensive knowledge of the terrain, hidden caches of supplies, and probably multiple escape routes. He was still out there. The FBI investigation that followed uncovered a sophisticated kidnapping operation that had been targeting hikers and campers throughout the Pacific Northwest. The underground facility contained evidence linking Hendricks to 17 disappearances over nearly a decade. But despite extensive searches involving federal agents, state police, and specialized tactical teams, Carl Hendricks was never found. The forest had reclaimed its predator. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Mike Thompson's situation? Comment below. 6 months later, I was promoted to senior ranger and assigned to a different national park. The Olympic National Park incident had taught me that evil doesn't always announce itself with supernatural manifestations or otherworldly phenomena. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look exactly like human beings. But I still wake up some nights remembering the absolute darkness of those underground chambers and wondering how many other Carl Hendricks are operating in remote wilderness areas around the country. The forests are vast, and rescue teams can't be everywhere. Some predators have learned to use our love of nature against us, and somewhere in those dark woods, they're still waiting for the next victim to wander off the marked trail. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to the other 17 victims. I read every single one. My name is Mike Thompson, and I've learned that the most dangerous predators are the ones who understand that isolated wilderness is the perfect hunting ground. Stay safe out there. My name is Alex Carter, and I found Tyler Johnson's wallet embedded 3 feet deep inside solid granite. A geological impossibility that shattered everything I thought I knew about reality. The radio call came in at 0547 hours on October 13, 2018, crackling through the morning mist that clung to the valleys of Blackwood National Forest like ghostly fingers. I was finishing my second cup of coffee in the ranger station when dispatch's voice cut through the static. Unit 7, we have a 1054 at coordinates 35.2844 degree N, 83.3289 degree W, missing hiker Tyler Johnson, age 24, failed to return from solo camping trip. Family requesting immediate assistance. Unit 7 copies, en route to LKP. I grabbed my pack, already loaded with standard SAR gear, GPS unit, emergency medical supplies, extra batteries, emergency rations for 72 hours. My Motorola radio was clipped to my shoulder, fully charged. The morning air bit through my wool ranger jacket as I stepped outside. I'd been working Blackwood for 8 years, ever since I transferred from the more civilized trails of Great Smoky Mountains. Something about this forest had always felt different. Not wrong exactly, but layered with secrets that went deeper than the ancient root systems of its towering oaks and chestnuts. My grandmother used to say I had the sight, that ability to sense things others missed. In ranger work, that intuition had saved lives more than once. The coordinates led me to Eagle's Rest Trail, a moderately difficult 6.2-mile loop that wound through some of the park's most remote backcountry. Tyler's Honda Civic sat alone in the trailhead parking area. October leaves scattered across its windshield like abandoned hopes. License plate matched the description. Tennessee TYL 4429. I radioed my position. Unit 7 at coordinates. Vehicle located. Beginning ground search pattern Alpha. The trail started normally enough. Well-maintained dirt path, orange blazes every 50 yards. The familiar pattern of boot prints from day hikers mixed with the delicate hoof prints of white-tailed deer. Tyler's tracks were easy to identify. Size 11 Merrell hiking boots with distinctive lug sole pattern, slightly worn on the outside edge indicating mild overpronation. The prints showed confident spacing, no signs of distress or fatigue. But 3 miles in, something changed. The forest grew unnaturally quiet. Not the peaceful silence of dawn, but the absolute absence of sound that makes a ranger's instincts scream danger. No bird calls, no rustle of small mammals in the underbrush. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. My skin prickled with awareness that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. Tyler's boot prints continued along the main trail for another quarter-mile, then veered sharply off-path toward a cluster of granite outcroppings known locally as the Devil's Teeth. Massive stone formations that jutted from the earth like the fossilized spine of some primordial beast. I followed the tracks through increasingly dense undergrowth, my breathing growing shallow as an invisible weight pressed against my chest. The air itself felt thick, viscous, like moving through water. My GPS unit flickered, the screen wavering between coordinates that couldn't possibly be accurate. Then I saw it. 20 feet up the face of a sheer granite cliff, Tyler Johnson's brown leather wallet was embedded in solid rock. Not sitting on a ledge, not wedged in a crack. Embedded, completely. The leather protruded maybe 2 inches from stone that showed no fractures, no tool marks, no evidence of any force that could have driven an object into granite. The rock face was smooth, unbroken, as if the wallet had somehow merged with the stone during the mountain's formation millions of years ago. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, peripheral awareness disappearing as my mind struggled to process the impossibility before me. Sweat formed instantly on my forehead despite the October chill. My fingers went numb, fumbling as I pulled out my radio. Dispatch, Unit 7, I need to report. The words fractured in my throat. How do you describe the impossible? I've located evidence of the missing hiker. Request backup and technical climbing team. Copy Unit 7. What's your status on the missing person? The question hung in the air like a curse. I stared at the wallet, its familiar brown leather somehow obscene against the gray granite. My jaw clenched involuntarily as reality shifted beneath my feet like quicksand. Still searching, I managed. But dispatch. Something's not right here. I spent the next hour documenting everything with my camera, taking GPS readings that showed impossible variance, measuring distances that seemed to change when I looked away. The wallet remained exactly where it was, defying physics with quiet malevolence. As afternoon shadows lengthened, something else began to trouble me. The shadows themselves weren't behaving correctly. Instead of moving with the sun's arc across the sky, they seemed to writhe and shift independent of their sources. A shadow cast by a dead oak would suddenly stretch toward me like a grasping hand, then snap back when I tried to focus on it directly. My radio crackled. Unit 7, this is dispatch. Family is asking for update on Tyler Johnson. I thought of my own family. Sarah making dinner, probably checking her phone, wondering when I'd be home. Emma, my 8-year-old, working on homework at the kitchen table, occasionally glancing at the door for Daddy to walk through. The normalcy of that life felt impossibly distant from this place where wallets grew from stone and shadows had their own agenda. Tell them we're actively searching, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll have more information soon. But as I spoke those words, I realized Tyler Johnson's family would never get the answers they deserved. Because the truth, that their son had somehow been swallowed by a reality that operated on rules older and more terrible than human understanding, was not something that could ever be officially reported. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Alex Carter's situation? Comment below. The sun was setting when I made the decision to camp near the Devil's Teeth. Standard protocol dictated returning to base camp before dark, but something kept me there. Not stubbornness or dedication to duty, but a growing certainty that Tyler Johnson was still alive somewhere in this twisted space, and that leaving might mean losing him forever. I set up my emergency shelter in a small clearing 50 yards from the granite formations, close enough to monitor the impossible wallet, but far enough to maintain some psychological distance from the wrongness that radiated from those stones. My Coleman lantern cast a reassuring circle of light, but beyond its reach, darkness gathered with unusual density. As night fell completely, the shadows began to move with purpose. At first, I told myself it was fatigue playing tricks on my perception. The human brain, when stressed and exhausted, creates patterns that aren't there. But when the shadow of my lantern, my own shadow, detached from my body and began walking circles around my campsite, I knew I was facing something that existed outside the boundaries of natural law. My breathing became rapid and shallow, each inhalation feeling inadequate. The muscles in my neck tightened like steel cables as I watched my shadow self complete a full circuit of the camp, moving with my exact gait and mannerisms but operating independently of my body. When it paused and turned to look directly at me, I felt something fundamental crack in my understanding of existence. The radio in my pack suddenly burst to life with static, then a voice, Tyler's voice, came through clear as mountain air. Alex Carter. I know you're out there. I can see your light, but I can't reach it. She has me, Alex, the old woman in the shadows. She's been waiting so long. My hands trembled as I grabbed the radio. Tyler, what's your location? I'm at the Devil's Teeth. Can you see my position? Static. Then, she showed me the truth, Alex, about what this place really is, about what we really are. We're not what we think we are. The universe is so much stranger and more terrible than we imagined. She's been here since before the mountains formed, since before humans learned to speak. And she's hungry, Alex. She's so hungry for someone who can see. The transmission cut to static, then silence. I sat in my circle of light, understanding with crystal clarity that I was no longer searching for a missing hiker. I was prey being hunted by something that had existed when the first shadows fell across the primordial earth. Tyler Johnson hadn't simply disappeared, he had been chosen. And now, because of my intuitive abilities, because I could sense things others couldn't, I had been chosen too. The shadows around my campsite began to thicken, becoming almost solid. Not merely the absence of light, but a substance unto itself, pooling and flowing like black water. From within that darkness I began to see shapes, tall, feminine, impossibly ancient. A figure in flowing robes that seemed woven from midnight itself, with eyes that held the cold light of stars that died before Earth was born. The legendary Shadow Witch. She had never been legend at all. The stories told by local tribes, dismissed by modern minds as primitive superstition, were warnings. Desperate attempts to communicate in truth too vast and terrible for human language to contain. This entity existed before civilization, before the very concept of humanity, in the spaces between light where reality grew thin and malleable. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a whisper that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to the primitive fear centers of my brain. The one with sight. I have waited so long for one who can truly see. Your kind stumbles through existence blind to the vast darkness that surrounds your tiny islands of light. But you sense the deeper currents, don't you, Alex Carter? My teeth began to chatter, not from cold but from a terror so primal it seemed to rewrite my genetic code in real time. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs had turned to lead weights. The rational part of my mind, the part trained in search and rescue protocols, emergency procedures, logical problem solving, simply shut down in the face of cosmic impossibility. Tyler, I whispered through numb lips. Where is Tyler? The shadows around her writhed like living things, and for a moment I saw him, Tyler Johnson, standing just behind her, his eyes reflecting that same cold starlight. But he was wrong somehow, stretched and distorted, as if viewed through a funhouse mirror made of space-time itself. He is becoming, she said, as you will become, as all with true sight must become. The universe is not the small, warm place your species imagines. It is vast and dark and full of hungers that predate the formation of galaxies. I am only one such hunger, and among the least of them. She gestured, and the granite face where Tyler's wallet was embedded began to ripple like water. The stone flowed and shifted, revealing not rock but a window into someplace else, a dimension where geometry followed rules that human minds were never meant to comprehend. In that space, I saw Tyler Johnson's true fate. Not death, but transformation into something that served purposes beyond human understanding. Your ranger skills, your knowledge of this forest, your intuitive abilities, all will serve a greater purpose when you accept what you truly are. Not a guardian of nature, but a bridge between the light-blind world of your kind and the deeper truths that lurk in eternal shadow. The choice, when it came, was brutally simple. Fight an entity older than continents and certainly die, or accept transformation and perhaps retain some fragment of who I was while serving something incomprehensibly vast and alien. But then, I thought of Sarah, of Emma asking why Daddy never came home, of the life that existed in warm kitchens and bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes, that tiny, precious bubble of human meaning in a cosmos that suddenly revealed itself as indifferent to human joy or suffering. No, I said, my voice cracking but carrying more conviction than I'd felt since this nightmare began. I don't accept that. I refuse to believe that love and family and human connection are just illusions in the face of cosmic horror. Maybe the universe is vast and dark and terrible, but that makes the light we create together even more important, not less. The Shadow Witch's laughter was like the sound of stars going supernova in distant galaxies. You still think you have a choice, little ranger. You still believe your human will matters in the face of forces that shaped reality before your sun ignited. But very well. Let us see how long your convictions last when you understand what you truly face. The shadows around me solidified into walls, then began to close inward like the contracting walls of a cosmic heart. But instead of crushing me, they lifted me, pulled me up and through dimensions that existed parallel to our own, where the laws of physics were mere suggestions and consciousness could exist independently of matter. I saw Tyler Johnson in his true state, not dead, not transformed, but existing in a kind of quantum superposition between human and something else. He was aware, conscious, but experiencing reality from a perspective that no human language could describe. The wallet embedded in granite was just the three-dimensional shadow of his higher dimensional existence. And I understood, with a clarity that threatened to shatter my sanity entirely, that this was happening to people all across the world. That there were entities like the Shadow Witch operating in every dark corner of existence, slowly harvesting those with the ability to perceive beyond normal human limitations. That the missing persons cases that never got solved, the people who vanished without trace in national parks and remote areas, many of them were feeding something vast and patient and utterly alien. The knowledge was too much. My mind began to fracture under the weight of cosmic truth, reality splitting into fragments that cut like glass. But just as I felt myself beginning to dissolve into the same quantum uncertainty that held Tyler, I made a choice that surprised even the ancient entity that held me. Instead of fighting the transformation or accepting it, I embraced the pain of incomprehension. I held on to my love for Sarah and Emma not as a denial of cosmic horror, but as a conscious choice to value human meaning even in full awareness of its cosmic insignificance. I chose to be terrified and small and precious rather than vast and terrible and empty. The Shadow Witch recoiled as if struck by physical force. For the first time in eons of existence, she encountered something she couldn't absorb or transform, a human consciousness that acknowledged ultimate meaninglessness while simultaneously choosing to create meaning anyway. "Impossible," she whispered, and for the first time her voice carried something like uncertainty. "You see the truth. You understand your insignificance. How can you still choose the illusion of importance?" "Because," I said, feeling myself falling back toward normal reality, "the illusion of importance is the most important thing in the universe. It's the only thing that makes any of this suffering worthwhile." I landed hard on the forest floor, my camping equipment scattered around me, the gray light of dawn filtering through autumn leaves. The devil's teeth looked like ordinary granite formations. My GPS unit showed normal coordinates. The radio crackled with routine morning traffic from other ranger units. But Tyler Johnson's wallet was gone from the stone face. In its place, carved into the granite with impossible precision, were 4 words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. He chose to stay. I never found Tyler Johnson's body. The official report listed him as a missing person, presumed dead due to exposure. His family held a memorial service that I attended, standing in the back while his mother wept and his father spoke about a son who loved hiking and photography and had planned to propose to his girlfriend when he returned from Blackwood. I never told them what really happened. How could I? Instead, I gave them the only truth that mattered, that Tyler had faced something impossible with courage, and that his choice, whatever it was, had been made with full knowledge of the consequences. But I know he's still out there, existing in dimensions that intersect with our world at specific points. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the forest and the shadows begin to behave strangely, I catch glimpses of him. He looks content, changed, but at peace with his transformation. The Shadow Witch still watches me. I feel her presence whenever I work night shifts, whenever I'm alone in the deep woods where reality grows thin. She's waiting to see if I'll change my mind, if the weight of cosmic truth will eventually crush my stubborn insistence on human meaning. So far, it hasn't. Every morning I wake up next to Sarah, kiss Emma goodbye as she heads to school, and choose to believe that love matters even in a universe that contains things like shadow witches and dimensional parasites, and truths too terrible for human comprehension. But I also carry emergency flares now, and a satellite communicator, and I never go into the deep woods alone. Because while I choose to believe in human meaning, I'm not stupid enough to think that protects me from cosmic horror. And sometimes late at night when the house is quiet and my family sleeps safely around me, I wonder if Tyler Johnson made the right choice after all, if transformation into something vast and terrible might be preferable to remaining human in a universe where humans are just temporary patterns of organized matter destined to dissolve back into chaos. But then Emma laughs at breakfast, or Sarah kisses me goodbye before work, and I remember why I choose the beautiful illusion of importance over the terrible truth of meaninglessness. Even if that choice makes me prey to things that hunger in the spaces between stars. My name is Alex Carter, and I found Tyler Johnson's wallet embedded in solid granite. But more importantly, I found something in myself worth choosing over cosmic truth. The stubborn, irrational, magnificent human decision to love in the face of an indifferent universe. And that choice, more than any cosmic horror, is what haunts me most of all. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Tyler Johnson. I read every single one. My name is Nathan Coleman, and I saw Emma Williams disappear 3 meters ahead of me on the Appalachian Trail before. Something impossible happened that will haunt every breath I take for the rest of my life. It was October 15th, 2018, 3:47 p.m., according to my Garmin GPS, when the world stopped making sense. I'd been a ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park for 8 years, long enough to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, and everything about that Tuesday afternoon felt like broken glass scraping against my spine. The call came in at 2:23 p.m. Unit 47, we've got a solo hiker, Emma Williams, age 24, reported overdue on the Alum Cave Trail, last known position near Arch Rock. Family's worried sick. She was supposed to check in 2 hours ago. Dispatch's voice crackled through my radio as I adjusted my pack straps. Standard protocol. GPS coordinates logged, emergency beacon activated, family contact information secured. Emma Williams, Syracuse University graduate student researching Appalachian folklore. Her thesis advisor had called it in when she missed their scheduled 2 p.m. phone check. What I didn't tell dispatch was the feeling crawling under my skin like insects made of ice. 8 years in these mountains, and I'd learned to listen when my gut screamed warnings. My grandfather, a Cherokee elder, always said some people were born with one foot in both worlds, the seen and unseen. Most days I tried to ignore that particular inheritance. Not today. I found Emma at 3:43 p.m., exactly where she should have been. Hiking alone in a bright blue jacket, blonde hair and a practical ponytail, consulting what looked like a leather-bound notebook every few steps. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. "Ma'am, Emma Williams?" I called out, following standard protocol for civilian contact. She turned, relief flooding her face. "Oh, thank God, a ranger. I think I might be a little lost. This trail doesn't match my research notes." That's when my sixth sense started screaming. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the past minute, though my weather radio showed no front moving through. The birds had gone silent, not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. And the shadows. Christ, the shadows were moving wrong, stretching toward us instead of following the late afternoon sun. "What kind of research?" I asked, stepping closer while my hand unconsciously drifted to my radio. "Local folklore. Specifically historical accounts of, well, this might sound crazy, but cult activity in these mountains. There are records of a group called the Eternal Harvest that operated here in the 1970s. They supposedly disbanded after a federal raid, but I've found evidence suggesting Emma Williams vanished. Not disappeared, not walked away, not ducked behind a tree. Vanished. 1 second she was standing 3 meters in front of me, notebook in hand, mouth still forming words. The next second, empty air. My mind scrambled for rational explanations while my body reacted with pure panic. Pupils dilated so wide that peripheral vision disappeared like staring through a tunnel. Breathing became shallow, desperate gasps as if the air had suddenly thinned. Sweat erupted across my forehead despite the impossible cold. "Emma!" I shouted, voice cracking. "Emma!" The radio crackled. "Unit 47, report status." My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the handset. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need immediate backup at coordinates 35.6307, 83.4938. Civilian missing under unusual circumstances." "Copy that, Unit 47. Backup en route. Can you clarify unusual circumstances? How do you tell dispatch that someone just fucking vanished into thin air?" Possible abduction. Will advise." I examined the ground where Emma had been standing. Soft earth, perfect for tracks. Her footprints led up to a specific spot, then nothing. No scuff marks indicating a struggle. No drag marks. No other footprints. Just hers, ending as abruptly as if she'd been plucked from existence. That's when I saw the notebook. Emma's leather journal lay open on the ground where she'd been standing. The page was covered in her neat handwriting, but the ink was moving. Words rearranging themselves as I watched, letters bleeding and reforming into a message that made my stomach lurch. The eternal harvest never ended. We've been waiting. She's perfect for the transition. Follow the old trail if you want her back. But know that we've been watching you too, Coleman. Your gift makes you valuable. My surname wasn't on my uniform nameplate. I'd never met Emma Williams before today. Nobody should have known my name. The handwriting shifted again. "Moonrise brings the harvest. You have until then." I checked my watch. 3:52 p.m. Sunset wasn't until 6:47. Moonrise at 9:23 p.m. Less than 6 hours. My radio buzzed. "Nathan? Nathan, where the hell are you?" The voice wasn't dispatch. It was my wife, Sarah. But Sarah didn't have access to Park Service frequencies. "Sarah, how are you?" "Nathan, the kids are asking when Daddy's coming home. Lucy drew you a picture of the 3 bears. Tommy lost another tooth. We're making your favorite chili for dinner. You promised you'd be home by 7 for family game night." The transmission cut to static, then silence. My hands had gone numb, fingers barely responsive as I fumbled with the radio controls. When dispatch came back online, they had no record of any transmission from my wife. Sarah, when I called her cell phone, was at work and hadn't spoken to anyone about my shift. "Nathan, you sound weird. Is everything okay?" "Fine," I lied, voice strained. "Just routine patrol. See you tonight." But I knew I might not be keeping that promise. The notebook's pages fluttered in windless air, stopping at a hand-drawn map. Old trails, some I recognized, others that shouldn't exist according to official park surveys. A path marked Harvest Moon ascent led from my current position deep into restricted backcountry, ending at a location marked with symbols that looked like they'd been carved rather than drawn. Backup arrived 20 minutes later. Rangers Jim Morrison and Kate Phillips, both solid professionals I'd worked with for years. I showed them Emma's footprints, the abrupt ending, the notebook. "Probably fell into a sinkhole," Jim suggested, though he couldn't explain the lack of disturbed earth. "Or maybe someone grabbed her and carried her. These mountains are full of caves and hiding spots." Kate examined the notebook with a frown. "This handwriting, it looks old, like it was written with a fountain pen. And what's with these symbols?" I didn't tell them about the words rearranging themselves. Didn't mention my wife's impossible radio call. Some things sound crazy even to fellow Rangers. We conducted a standard grid search until darkness forced us back to base camp. Official search and rescue protocols would resume at dawn with additional personnel, K-9 units, and helicopter support. But I knew Emma Williams didn't have until dawn. At 8:30 p.m., I made a decision that violated every protocol in the Ranger Handbook. I lied to my shift supervisor, falsified my location log, and headed back into the wilderness alone with nothing but my standard gear. Motorola radio, GPS unit, emergency medical kit, headlamp, backup batteries, multi-tool, and my grandfather's obsidian knife. The one item in my pack that wasn't regulation. The old trail didn't exist on any official map, but it was there. Faint path markers carved into trees, worn smooth by decades of use. Symbols that matched Emma's notebook, leading deeper into backcountry that should have been impassable. My intuitive abilities kicked into overdrive as I followed the trail. Every step felt like walking through invisible spider webs. Temperature fluctuations with no meteorological explanation, electronics glitching, GPS coordinates shifting randomly, radio picking up fragments of conversations in languages I didn't recognize. The path led me through terrain that defied geology, rock formations that seemed carved rather than naturally eroded, trees growing in perfect geometric patterns, clearings where the ground was permanently stained dark, as if the earth itself had been poisoned. At 9:15 p.m., 8 minutes before moonrise, I heard Emma screaming. Not distant, not muffled, crystal clear, echoing from a direction that my GPS insisted was solid mountain face. I followed the sound through what appeared to be a solid rock wall but yielded like mist when I pressed against it. I emerged into a hidden valley that shouldn't exist. Dozens of people in dark robes stood in concentric circles around a stone altar. Their faces were wrong, features subtly shifted as if humanity was a mask they wore imperfectly. Emma Williams lay bound on the altar, conscious and terrified, while a figure in an elaborate headdress raised a blade that seemed to absorb light. "The intuitive has arrived," the leader announced without turning around. "We felt you approaching, Nathan Coleman. Your bloodline carries the gift we've sought for decades." My breathing turned shallow and rapid, muscles in my neck tensioned like steel cables. Vision narrowed to tunnel focus as adrenaline flooded my system. "Let her go," I called out, hand moving to my radio. Dead static. GPS showing impossible coordinates, every piece of modern technology rendered useless. "She volunteered," the leader replied. finally turning. The face beneath the hood was my own, but decades older and carved with symbols that seemed to move in the moonlight. Just as you will volunteer, once you understand what we offer. I'm nothing like you. You feel things others cannot. See patterns in the unseen world. Your Cherokee ancestors knew the old ways before Christianity corrupted them. We preserved those ways, perfected them. The blade descended toward Emma's chest. I reacted without thinking, drawing my grandfather's obsidian knife and charging the altar. The cultists moved to intercept me, but they moved wrong. Joints bending in directions that violated anatomy, limbs extending beyond human proportions. The first one I reached had skin that gave way like wet clay when my blade found its throat. Black ichor sprayed across my face, burning like acid. The thing that had looked human moments before revealed itself as something assembled from parts that had never quite fit together. More surrounded me. Not 20 or 30 people as I'd initially counted, but the same 8 figures moving faster than humanly possible, creating the illusion of a crowd. Each cut of my blade revealed their true nature, not possession or transformation, but things that had been wearing human shapes like ill-fitting clothes. Emma's screaming intensified as the leader's blade pierced her skin. Real blood, red and human, flowed onto the altar. Where it touched the stone, reality wavered like heat shimmer. That's when I understood. This wasn't a ritual to sacrifice Emma. It was a ritual to birth something into our world, using her life force as an anchor point. My sixth sense exploded into full awareness. I could see the dimensional membrane separating our reality from somewhere else. Emma's blood was dissolving that barrier, allowing something vast and hungry to push through. The obsidian knife in my hand grew warm, then hot. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. Some tools choose their wielders, Nathan. When the time comes, trust the blade. I stopped fighting the cultist and focused on the altar. Whatever was trying to push through the dimensional gap was almost fully manifested. A writhing mass of organs and limbs that defied description, held together by malevolent intelligence that regarded humans as insects. The knife guided my throw, perfect arc, spinning end over end, striking the altar stone where Emma's blood pooled. The obsidian blade shattered on impact, but the fragments continued moving, embedding themselves in the stone and expanding outward like cracks in ice. Reality snapped back into place with an audible crack that shattered trees for 100 yards in every direction. The cultists collapsed into puddles of organic matter that steamed and dissolved. The hidden valley flickered like a failing television signal before solidifying into normal Appalachian wilderness. Emma lay unconscious, but breathing on what was now ordinary stone. I carried her out on my back, following GPS coordinates that finally made sense again. Radio contact reestablished at exactly 11:47 p.m. Unit 47, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours. What's your status? I found her, I reported. Emma Williams is alive but unconscious, requesting immediate medical evac at coordinates 35.6284, 83.4919. Emma recovered fully with no memory of the events after 3:45 p.m. Official reports attributed her disappearance to a fall into a previously unknown cave system, followed by mild hypothermia and temporary amnesia. Her notebook, when examined by investigators, contained only research notes about Appalachian folklore. No moving text, no impossible maps, no references to the eternal harvest. But 3 weeks later, I received a package with no return address. Inside, photocopies of newspaper articles dating back to 1847, all describing identical disappearances in the Great Smoky Mountains. Different decades, different victims, but the same pattern. Young people researching local history, vanishing during daylight hours found days later with no memory of their experiences. The articles mentioned a recurring rumor about a group calling themselves the Eternal Harvest. Each time authorities thought they'd eliminated the cult, new disappearances would begin within a generation. At the bottom of the package, in handwriting, I recognized as my own, but had never written, "The blade chose well, but they'll return. They always return. Train your children to listen for the whispers." I never told Sarah about that night. Never explained why I started teaching our kids to trust their instincts, to recognize when something feels wrong even if they can't explain why. But every October 15th, I wake up at 3:47 a.m. in a cold sweat, knowing that somewhere in these mountains the eternal harvest is still waiting, still watching, still hunting for people like Emma Williams. And people like me. Last month my daughter Lucy came home from school with a drawing. "I dreamed about this place, Daddy," she said, showing me a picture of a stone altar surrounded by figures in dark robes. The drawing was signed with symbols I recognized from my grandfather's stories. My name is Nathan Coleman, and I saved Emma Williams from something that shouldn't exist. But I'm starting to think Emma Williams was just the beginning. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Nathan Coleman's situation? Comment below. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Emma Williams. I read every single one. My name is Benjamin Foster, and at 6:47 a.m. on October 13th, 2018, my radio crepitani with the call that would drag me into a nightmare older than the mountains themselves. 23 years wearing the Ranger badge in Great Smoky Mountains National Park had taught me to expect the unexpected, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what awaited me in the shadow of Cataract Falls. Unit 7, this is dispatch. We have a code yellow, missing person report. 20-year-old male Jordan Campbell last seen yesterday evening at Cataract Falls trailhead. Family just arrived at visitor center, requesting immediate response. I grabbed my radio, already reaching for my pack. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 7 responding. ETA 15 minutes. The static crackled back. 10-4, Ben. Family's pretty shaken up. Mother's asking specifically for you. My fingers worked automatically checking gear. GPS unit, first aid kit, emergency beacon, extra batteries for the headlamp, rope, water purification tablets. The morning air bit through my uniform as I stepped outside the ranger station, breath misting in the 40-degree temperature. October in the Smokies meant early frost and unpredictable weather, not ideal conditions for someone spending a night outdoors unprepared. The drive to the visitor center took 12 minutes on winding mountain roads slick with morning dew. Inside I found them. A middle-aged woman clutching a steaming coffee cup with trembling hands, her husband's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Their eyes held that specific terror unique to parents whose child has vanished into wilderness. "Mrs. Campbell, I'm Ranger Foster." The woman looked up, and I saw Jordan's eyes staring back at me, that same bright green that would haunt my dreams for months afterward. "He was supposed to call last night," she whispered, voice cracking. "Jordan always calls. Every night when he's camping, he calls to let us know he's safe. When his phone went straight to voicemail." She couldn't finish. Mr. Campbell cleared his throat. "Jordan's an experienced hiker, Eagle Scout. He knows these mountains, but he's never missed a check-in call. Never." I pulled out my incident report pad, the familiar weight of routine offering small comfort. "Tell me about yesterday. What time did he arrive? What was he carrying? Any specific plans he mentioned?" "He got here around 2 p.m., Mrs. Campbell said, steadying her voice. "He had his big pack, the red North Face one, with his tent, sleeping bag, camp stove. He was planning to hike to the falls and camp overnight, then continue to Charles Bunyan today." She paused, struggling. "He was so excited about photographing the waterfalls with the autumn colors." Something cold settled in my stomach. "Cataract Falls? You're sure he said Cataract Falls specifically?" They nodded in unison. Mr. Campbell frowned. "Is there something wrong with that area?" I kept my expression neutral, but internally, warning bells screamed. Cataract Falls sat in a remote section of the park where we'd had incidents. 3 missing persons in the last 15 years. All found eventually, but not in ways that made sense. And the stories the survivors told, when they could remember anything at all, never quite aligned with physical evidence. Just want to be thorough, I assured them. Did Jordan mention meeting anyone? Any other hikers or campers? No, he was going solo. That's his thing. Digital detox weekends, he calls them. Mrs. Campbell's laugh held no humor. Though he promised to keep his phone on for emergencies, I finished collecting details. Jordan's exact clothing description: blue flannel shirt, dark hiking pants, black hiking boots, his emergency contact information, his planned route, and the contents of his pack. Then I made the promise that would bind me to this nightmare. I'll bring him home. The drive to Cataract Falls trailhead took 30 minutes through increasingly dense forest. The Cherokee National Forest pressed close to the narrow road, ancient oaks and maples creating a canopy so thick that morning sunlight filtered through in scattered golden patches. My radio chattered with routine morning traffic, other rangers checking in, maintenance reports, weather updates. Normal sounds of a normal day, except nothing about this felt normal. I parked at the gravel trailhead and stepped into air that tasted wrong. Not bad exactly, but off, like breathing through a wet cloth. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees since leaving the visitor center, despite the climbing sun. Mist clung to the forest floor with unnatural persistence, creating shifting patterns that seemed almost deliberate. My boots crunched on the frost-covered leaves as I approached the trail register. Jordan's signature stared back at me from yesterday's entries. Jordan Campbell, solo hike to Cataract Falls, exit planned 10:14. His handwriting was confident, neat, the writing of someone excited about adventure, not someone walking into danger. The trail began normally enough. Well-maintained path, proper blazing, familiar terrain, I'd hiked hundreds of times. But within the first quarter mile, wrongness crept in at the edges of perception. The forest fell silent. No bird calls, no insect buzz, no rustle of small animals foraging. Even my footsteps seemed muffled, absorbed by the oppressive quiet. My radio crackled. Unit 7, this is dispatch. Any contact with our missing person? Negative, dispatch. Beginning grid search pattern at coordinate 35.6891 degrees N, 83.53 weight degrees W. Visibility poor due to fog conditions. Copy that. Weather service shows clear skies in your area. I looked up at the thick mist surrounding me, then at my GPS reading. The coordinates were correct, but the weather service was dead wrong. Fog hung in the air like gray wool, growing denser with each step deeper into the forest. 20 minutes in, I found Jordan's first marker, a granola bar wrapper, half buried under decomposing leaves. I knelt and examined it with my flashlight. The wrapper was clean, dry, recently discarded. No weathering, no animal damage. But something about its placement bothered me, too perfectly positioned as if deliberately placed for discovery. I photographed the wrapper's location with my phone, noting GPS coordinates and time, standard search protocol. But when I stood to continue, a sound froze my blood. Children's laughter, high and musical, echoing through the mist from somewhere ahead. My hand moved instinctively to my radio. Dispatch, Unit 7. Are there any reported family groups in the Cataract Falls area? Negative, Unit 7. Trail permits show only your missing person and 2 adult hikers who exited yesterday evening. The laughter came again, closer this time. Multiple voices, maybe 3 or 4 children, playing some kind of game. My training kicked in. Lost children took priority over everything else. I keyed my radio again. Dispatch, I have possible additional missing persons. Children's voices detected in Sector 7 Alpha. Requesting backup. Copy that, Unit 7. Dispatching Unit 12 to your location. ETA 45 minutes. I pushed deeper into the fog, following the sound. The laughter stayed just ahead, always just out of sight, leading me further from the main trail. Warning bells screamed in my mind, but children's safety overrode everything else. Every ranger learned that fundamental rule: children first, questions later. The terrain grew rougher. Roots caught my boots, hidden rocks threatened to turn ankles, and the mist thickened until I could barely see 3 feet ahead. My GPS showed I was paralleling an old logging road that hadn't been used since the 1960s, but the children's voices kept pulling me away from any recognizable path. Hello? I called out. "This is Park Ranger Foster. Are you kids okay? Are you lost?" The laughter stopped immediately. Total silence pressed down like a physical weight. Even the sound of my own breathing seemed muffled. Then, from directly ahead, "Mister? Mister, can you help us?" A little girl's voice, high and sweet, terrified. I fought through a tangle of briars toward the sound, accepting long scratches on my arms as thorns caught my sleeves. "I'm coming. Keep talking so I can find you." "We're scared, mister. We can't find our way home." The voice came from a small clearing, maybe 30 yards across. But when I broke through the tree line, I found only empty space. No children, no signs anyone had been there. Just my own breathing and the steady drip of condensation from overhead branches. My radio squawked. "Unit 7, this is Unit 12. Approaching your last known coordinates. You copy?" I grabbed the radio. "Unit 12, be advised I've lost contact with the children. Continuing search pattern." "What children, Ben? Dispatch didn't mention any children." My blood turned to ice water. I clearly remembered calling in the children's voices. I remembered requesting backup specifically for possible additional missing persons. But when I replayed my last radio transmission in my mind, "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Requesting backup for missing person search." Had I imagined the children? Was stress causing auditory hallucinations? 23 years of experience said no, but the radio log didn't lie. "Unit 12, disregard child reference. Continue to my coordinates for standard missing person search." "Copy that, Unit 7, ETA 30 minutes. I stood in the clearing, heart hammering against my ribs in a rhythm that seemed too fast, too irregular. Sweat gathered under my arms despite the cold, and my breathing came in shallow puffs that dispersed too quickly in the still air. Something was wrong with this place, wrong in ways that had nothing to do with weather or terrain. A stick snapped behind me. I spun around, hand moving to the taser on my belt. "Jordan? Jordan Campbell?" No response. But in the mist, maybe 20 feet away, a shadow moved. Human-shaped, but too small to be Jordan. Child-sized. "Hey, are you okay?" I approached slowly, hands visible, voice calm. "I'm a park ranger. I'm here to help." The shadow remained motionless. As I got closer, details emerged through the fog. A small figure in old-fashioned clothing, standing perfectly still. A little girl in a dress that looked like something from decades past, her back to me. "Sweetie, what's your name?" She turned around. What I saw destroyed every rational thought in my head. The little girl's face was wrong. Features too sharp, eyes too bright, skin with a waxy pallor that suggested death rather than life. But it was her smile that stopped my heart. Too wide, revealing teeth filed to points. "We've been waiting for you," she said in that sweet, innocent voice that had led me here. Other children emerged from the mist, 4 of them ranging in apparent age from maybe 6 to 12, all in old-fashioned clothing, all with that same waxy pallor and those terrible, sharp-toothed smiles, and all with eyes that held intelligence far beyond their apparent years. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. Missing children from decades past? Impossible. But the alternative, that these things had never been human at all, was worse. "Where's Jordan?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. The oldest-looking child, a boy in suspenders and a cap, tilted his head like a curious bird. "Jordan's with us now. He's learning the rules." "What rules?" "The rules for staying, the rules for serving, the rules for bringing others." The little girl giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "Just like we learned. Just like you'll learn." Ice filled my veins. These weren't lost children. They were predators. And I was the prey. I reached for my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 7, I need immediate..." The radio crackled with static, then went dead. I tried my cell phone. No signal. Even my GPS unit flickered and died, screen fading to black. "Technology doesn't work well here," the boy explained pleasantly. "Too much interference from the old places." From the deep places, from where we come from when the moon is dark. The children began moving closer, forming a loose circle around me. Their movements were wrong, too fluid, too coordinated. Not like children playing, but like pack hunters surrounding prey. My hand found the taser. "Stay back, I'm warning you." They laughed in unison, a chorus of innocence hiding something ancient and hungry. "Silly mister," the little girl said. "You can't hurt us. We're already dead." That's when I saw the wounds. Now that they were closer, I could see what the old-fashioned clothing had hidden. Terrible injuries, decades old but somehow still fresh. The boy's throat had been slashed, a gaping wound that should have killed him instantly. One girl was missing most of her left arm, torn off at the shoulder. Another had burn marks covering half her face. But they moved and spoke as if nothing was wrong, as if they hadn't died in agony decades ago. "The master needs fresh servants," the boy continued conversationally. "Jordan was perfect. Young, strong, isolated. But one isn't enough for the ceremony. We need a pair." "Where is Jordan?" I demanded, raising the taser. "Oh, he's here. Look up." Against every instinct, I raised my eyes. Jordan Campbell hung from the branches of an enormous oak tree, suspended by ropes that looked older than the mountains themselves. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. I could see his chest rising and falling, see his eyes tracking my movement. He was conscious, aware, and completely unable to move or speak. And his body was wrong. His arms and legs had been broken in multiple places, then repositioned at impossible angles. Fresh blood seeped from wounds I couldn't fully see through his torn clothing. But the worst part was his eyes. They held a terror so complete, so absolute, that looking into them made my sanity fray at the edges. "He's being prepared," the girl explained. "The bones must be arranged properly for the ritual. The blood must flow in the correct patterns. The master is very particular about these things." Rage exploded through my terror. This was still a search and rescue. Jordan was still alive. Everything else was just obstacles to overcome. I triggered the taser at the nearest child. The electrodes passed right through her body as if she were made of mist. She giggled and clapped her hands. "I told you that wouldn't work, but we appreciate the effort." I dropped the useless weapon and ran. Behind me, children's laughter followed through the forest like hunting hounds. But I had advantages they might not expect. I knew these mountains, knew the terrain, knew every trail and shortcut within a 50-mile radius. If I could reach the main trail, if I could get to Unit 12. Branches whipped my face as I crashed through underbrush. My lungs burned as I sucked in the thin mountain air. Behind me, the laughter grew closer, but I pushed harder, drawing on reserves of endurance built through years of mountain rescue operations. I broke through a wall of rhododendrons and found myself on the old logging road my GPS had shown earlier. Wide enough for vehicles, clear of obstacles, it offered the fastest route back to civilization. I turned downhill and ran harder than I'd run since my army days. The laughter stopped. Silence fell so complete I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. But I didn't slow down. Silence was worse than laughter. Silence meant they were hunting differently now. My radio crackled back to life. "Unit 7, this is Unit 12. I'm at your last coordinates. Where are you?" I grabbed the radio without slowing. "Unit 12, I'm on the old logging road, grid reference." Shit. My GPS was still dead. "I'm heading downhill on the logging road." "Something's wrong here, Mike. Something really wrong." "Ben, you're breaking up. Say again?" "The children they're not." "How do you explain the impossible?" "Just get backup. Get lots of backup. And bring weapons." "Ben, I can't understand you. Signal's really bad." The radio died again, but ahead I could see where the logging road intersected with the main trail. 500 yards. I could make it. That's when I heard Jordan scream. Not the scream of someone in pain. I'd heard plenty of those during mountain rescues. This was the scream of someone whose soul was being torn apart. It echoed through the forest with impossible volume, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I stopped running. Every instinct screamed at me to keep going, to escape. to save myself. But Jordan was still alive, still suffering, and I'd made a promise to his parents. I turned around and headed back into hell. The children were waiting for me in the clearing. They stood in a perfect circle around the oak tree where Jordan hung, and in the center of that circle something else waited. The Master. I understood now why the children served willingly. The thing that stood between them defied description, not because it was indescribable, but because my mind refused to process what my eyes saw. Tall as a man, but wrong in every proportion. Skin like wet leather. Eyes that reflected light like an animal's, but held intelligence that was terrifyingly human. Ranger Benjamin Foster, it said in a voice like grinding stone. Welcome to our family. The thing knew my name, had known I was coming. This had all been planned. Let him go, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Take me instead. The Master tilted its head, considering. Oh, I'll take you both. The ritual requires a pair, after all. One to anchor the darkness, one to open the door. Your missing person will serve perfectly as the anchor. Broken, terrified, desperate. And you, those terrible eyes studied me. You'll open the door. Such strength, such determination, such love for family. It knew about my family, my wife Sarah, my daughter Emma, my son Michael. The knowledge was there in its eyes, a promise of what would happen if I failed here. The children brought you here with their calls, the Master continued, as they've brought others over the decades, as they brought Jordan yesterday when he heard a little girl crying for help in the forest. Jordan had heard the same thing I had, the children's voices calling for help. He'd followed them here just as I had, just as others had before us. You see, Ranger Foster, humans are predictable. Show them someone in distress, especially a child, and they abandon all caution. Evolution made you protectors, and we've learned to exploit that weakness. I looked up at Jordan, still conscious, still aware. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw not just terror but something else. Determination. He was fighting whatever they'd done to him, fighting to stay aware, fighting to help somehow. The ritual begins at sunset, the Master said. Until then, you wait. The children moved closer, and I felt invisible bonds wrap around my arms and legs. Not ropes or chains, but something that held me motionless regardless. I could still speak, still see and hear, but my body no longer obeyed my commands. Hours passed. The Master spoke in a language that predated human civilization, words that made my ears ache and my vision blur. The children responded in the same tongue, their young voices somehow making the ancient words sound even more obscene. As the sun began to set, they started preparing Jordan for whatever was coming. I won't describe the details. Some things should never be written down, never shared, never remembered. But I will say this. Jordan Campbell was braver than anyone should have to be. He never begged, never broke. Even when they began the process that would turn him into a gateway for something that should never exist in our world. That's when I felt it. A warmth in my chest, spreading outward like sunrise. Not heat, exactly, but something deeper. Something connected to every memory of my family. Every moment of love and connection and fierce protectiveness. Sarah's laugh on our wedding day. Emma's tiny hand gripping my finger when she was born. Michael's proud smile when he caught his first fish. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee kissed better, every promise to keep them safe. The invisible bonds around me began to weaken. What? The Master turned toward me, confusion flickering across its inhuman features. I thought about my promise to Jordan's parents, about Mrs. Campbell's green eyes full of desperate hope, about Mr. Campbell's quiet faith that I would bring their son home. The bond snapped. I lunged at the nearest child, the little girl who'd first called to me. My hands passed through her misty form, but something else connected. The warmth in my chest flared outward, and where it touched her, she screamed and dissolved. Impossible, the Master snarled. You're just human, just meat and fear and weakness. I looked up at Jordan, still hanging from the tree but now watching me with something like hope in his eyes. "No," I said. "I'm someone's husband, someone's father, someone who keeps his promises." The warmth exploded outward. The other children fled, their forms dissolving at the edges as they retreated into the mist. But the master stood firm, growing larger, more solid, more real. "You think love makes you strong?" It laughed. "Love makes you vulnerable. Love gives me weapons to use against you. I know where your family lives, Ranger Foster. I know their routines, their weaknesses. Touch me, and they die." For a moment, doubt crept in. This thing was ancient, powerful, connected to forces I couldn't understand. What if it really could hurt my family? What if saving Jordan doomed the people I loved most? Then I heard it, Jordan's voice, weak but clear. "Don't let it win." He was willing to die to keep this thing from claiming another victim. Willing to sacrifice himself for people he'd never met, for children who might someday wander into these woods. I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be, what kind of example I wanted to set for my own children. I walked straight into the master's arms. Its claws raked across my chest, tearing through my uniform shirt like tissue paper. Pain exploded through my nervous system as supernatural cold poured into the wounds. But the warmth inside me burned brighter, fed by every memory of love and protection and unshakable determination. The master's form began to waver. "This isn't possible. Humans don't have this kind of power." "You're right," I said, blood running down my chest. "Humans don't, but fathers do." The warmth reached critical mass. Light erupted from every wound, every scratch, every point where the master's claws had touched me. It filled the clearing, burned away the unnatural mist, and sent the master's scream echoing across the mountains. When the light faded, I was alone with Jordan. He hung unconscious now, but breathing steadily. The ropes that held him were ordinary manila hemp, frayed and old, but cuttable. It took me 20 minutes to climb the tree and get him down safely, checking for spinal injuries and internal bleeding as I'd been trained. He was hurt, broken ribs, lacerations, severe dehydration, but alive. Completely, miraculously alive. My radio crackled back to life. "Unit 7, this is Unit 12. Ben, where the hell are you?" I looked around. We were in a small clearing, maybe a quarter-mile from the main trail. Normal forest, normal afternoon light filtering through normal trees. No sign of supernatural activity. No evidence that anything unusual had happened here. Except for Jordan's injuries, and the claw marks across my chest that would scar in the shape of something like protective sigils. "Unit 12, I've got him. Grid reference 35.6847 again, 83.5291 to Gride W. I need immediate medical evacuation. Multiple injuries, but conscious and stable." I carried Jordan out of the forest on my back, following game trails and ranger shortcuts I'd known for decades. Unit 12 met us halfway with a medical team, and within an hour, Jordan was in a helicopter heading for the hospital in Knoxville. The official report listed cause of injuries as bear attack with subsequent disorientation. Jordan's memory of the incident was spotty. He remembered hearing children calling for help, then nothing until waking up in my arms at the bottom of the tree. The doctors attributed the memory loss to head trauma. I never told anyone the truth. Who would believe it? More importantly, who needed to carry that knowledge? But I did make some changes. I requested transfer to a desk job within 6 months, spending my final 5 years of service in administration rather than field work. I was home every night for dinner, present for every soccer game and school play and family vacation, because I learned something in that forest that no amount of ranger training had taught me. The greatest supernatural power in the universe isn't magic or ancient rituals or creatures from beyond human understanding. It's a parent's love. And that love can burn away any darkness, defeat any evil, and keep any promise. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Ben Foster's situation? Comment below. Even now, 15 years later, I sometimes hear children's laughter in the forest behind my house. But it doesn't frighten me anymore, because I know what I carry inside me, what we all carry if we're willing to fight for the people we love. Jordan Campbell recovered completely. He became a park ranger himself, working in Yellowstone. He sends me Christmas cards every year with photos of his own family. His daughter has her grandmother's green eyes. The Cataract Falls area was quietly closed to overnight camping after my report, officially due to increased bear activity. Unofficially, because some places should be left alone and some secrets are too dangerous to risk. But I kept my promise. I brought him home. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to the lost children. I read every single one.